Hello. If you haven't, you might want to watch the video before this one before you go any further. It came out on Monday because we are starting with the second part of Assipattle and the Master Storeworm. So, yeah, might be worth going back and watching that previous video first. If you have already seen that and you're back for part two, that's great. Quick reminder, Assipattle has stolen his dad's horse, which is called Tietgong, which is the fastest horse in the land, and he has ridden off to do battle with the great and terrible Storeworm, which is ravaging the land and which the king is going to do battle with in the morning. So we'll catch up with Assipattle and see how he does. See you after the story. And so, Assipattle arrived at the shoreline just before the sun was rising. He tethered the swift Tietgong next to a small cottage and snuck stealthily inside. The embers of a peat fire were still glowing in the hearth of the cottage, and careful not to wake anyone who might be sleeping, he took the still hot peat, put it into a small cauldron, snuck back out, made his way down to the shoreline where the king's boat stood ready for him to take him out to sea to do battle with the great Master Storeworm. A watchman, a guard, had been left with the boat. Assipattle greeted him. "You must be tired and cold." "Oh, I am. But I can't leave my watch. I'm not leaving this boat unattended. It's the king's boat." "Well, you're welcome to come and join me for some breakfast if you like." I wouldn't tell anyone. Assipattle began digging in the sand to make a pit for a fire. As he dug, he suddenly started to shout, "Gold! Gold! There's gold here! There's gold in this land! I've struck gold on the beach!" Well, as soon as the guardsman heard this, he was up out of the boat, running over to see for himself. Quicker than that, Assipattle snatched up the cauldron, ran to the boat, pushed it out to sea and jumped in, and was away before the guard could even realise he'd been tricked. Assipattle paddled swiftly out towards the great beast. Its lounging head above the wave looked like a vast, craggy island. Assipattle knew that as soon as the sun struck the creature's eyes, it would wake and give 7 great yawns. He paddled harder and harder towards his goal. When the beast opened its mouth, it dragged in all the surrounding seawater, including Assipattle aboard the king's boat, and he was swallowed down the creature's gullet, deep inside the monster. Strangely enough, it wasn't dark down there. It glowed with an eerie phosphorus light. The stench was almost overpowering. But on and on Assipattle went, the water becoming shallower and shallower, until eventually the boat was stuck. Its mast wedged the great creature's innards. Assipattle moved quickly. He took the small cauldron of the burning peat. He found the creature's great liver, took a knife from his belt, sliced it open, blew on the peat, and he blew till his lips cracked. He blew till he thought his head might burst, but eventually the peat brought forth fire. He put the cauldron in the storeworm's liver, and the oils there soon caught afire. Assipattle, before the beast began to writhe in agony, jumped back in the boat and waited. Oh, it didn't take long. That pain, that fire in the beast people standing on the shore. The king wanting an explanation for what had happened to his boat. The guardsman frantically explaining. The king's guard looked out to sea. Smoke began billowing from the great storeworm's nostrils and mouth. It writhed, it roared, it began to retch. Huge waves came up onto the beach, forcing the king and his men into the hills. Eventually, one great wretch outshot the king's boat, Assipattle, still into it. He was swept across the sea, back to the shore and up to the hills, where he waited, the king and his men, and they turned to watch what would happen next. The monster reared high into the sky, its tongue lashing out so high it caught on the crescent moon. It would have dragged it down with it had the tongue not slipped off. When it hit the earth, it cleaved the land in two, water rushing in to form what we now call the Baltic Sea. The creature then, in its death throes, flung its head up again. When it smashed back down onto the sea, teeth flew out. And when they landed, they formed the Shetland Isles. Again, it writhed its head into the air, smashing back down on the ocean. More teeth flew, and where they landed, formed the Orkney Islands one final time. This master starworm, this demon of the sea, reared up, and when it fell again, teeth that flew from it formed the Faroe Islands. Eventually, the creature, the fire inside, burning away at it, curled up, caused a great charred landmass there in the ocean. And that landmass, we know that landmass today as Iceland. The glow in the hills is the fire still burning in that great beast's liver. Well, as for Assipattle, the king was very impressed with his quick thinking, with his bravery, with his rashness. He was introduced to the princess. They took a great liking to each other, which developed into love, and so they were married. And they lived as long and as happy as any other couple might. There we go then. Everything worked out all right in the end. Just bit of cunning, bit of cleverness there. So got our second story coming up. It's a mermaid story from the south of England. It's quite light-hearted and good fun, and shows that maybe mermaids aren't quite as deserving as the reputation they've got for dragging people into the depths to their doom, as you might think. So I hope you enjoy this one, and I'll be back with another story. And no, I'll not say anything more than that just yet. Yeah, like I say, I'll be back with another story on Friday. So stay safe until then. Bye. Down on the Cornish coast, just west of St Ives, I've checked this on a map, it's the small village of Zennor. Now, many years ago, before computers or YouTube or mobile phones, cameras, anything like that, the best form of entertainment for the people of Zennor was the Sunday service. Especially afterwards, it involved socialising and chatting. What they loved most was the Zennor Church Choir. This choir was said to be the finest in all the land. They could sing the sky blue, they could sing daffodils yellow, even the dolphins would come and frolic, if you like, in the sea when the choir sang. The best singer of all was a young man called Matty. As well as having the best voice, he was also the best looking young man in the village. And all the girls hoped that he would ask to walk them home afterwards. Now one Sunday, a stranger came to the church during when the choir was singing, the heavy oak door creaked open, and in snuck a very heavily cloaked individual, hooded from head to toe, covered in black. Everyone wondered who they were, because they kept coming back week after week after week. Eventually, Matty resolved that he would find out who this stranger was. He would reveal their identity. So one Sunday, after the choir had finished, just as the stranger was leaving, Matty snuck out a side door in the church and followed the stranger down a gorse path which led to the sea. And he kept a safe distance back. He would occasionally hide behind walls or behind a bush so that if the stranger was to turn round, he'd be hidden from view. The path led down to the sea. Much to Matty's amazement, the stranger got to the edge of the sea. He threw off their cloak to reveal a mermaid. She dived into the sea. Now, the story doesn't say how the mermaid walked down the path or even got to the church, but that doesn't really matter. What does matter is, before the mermaid disappeared, she turned and saw Matty watching her. And she sang to him. I'll not sing, but she sang, Matty, Matty, come with me. Matty, Matty, come to the sea. Now, when Matty heard this, it was like a thread came from the mermaid's mouth, in one ear, out the other, and Matty was pulled by the beauty of the song to the shore and into the sea, which went over his feet, over his shins, over his knees, up, over his shoulders, covered his head. He vanished from sight. Now, when Matty didn't come home for his lunch, or come home from his tea, or even didn't come home the next morning, the villagers searched for him. 3 days and 3 nights, and more. They could find no sign of him. They eventually came to the conclusion that, well, he must have been taken by some terrible sea monster, never to be seen again. Some 20 years later, a fisherman, waiting for the tide until it was safe to go into the harbour at St. Ives, decided to throw anchor. While he was waiting for the tide, he sat back, lit his pipe, began to smoke, until he was disturbed by a voice shouting. He looked over the side of his boat, and there, much to his surprise, was a mermaid glaring up at him, cradling a small baby. Oi! She shouted. Oi! Your anchor is blocking the entrance to my home. My husband Matty will be back soon. I've got to get the tea ready. I've got to cook for him. I've got 16 children to look after. Well, not wanting to get into an argument with a mermaid, wordlessly, amazed, a bit scared, the fisherman pulled up his anchor. As soon as he'd done so, the mermaid disappeared beneath the ocean. Eventually, when the fisherman got into port, he rather shakingly went straight to the pub and ordered a rum to calm his nerves. May have had more than one rum, to be honest. Eventually, when the villagers there got him to speak about what he'd seen, what had shaken him so much, he told them the story and decided that he'd never go to sea again. The isolation had got to him and it had driven him mad. He was seeing things. But the people of St. Ives smiled and nodded and even clapped him on the back, bought him more rum, and said that this was great news. But years ago, a local lad had disappeared and had no idea what had happened to them. But his story had assured them that young Matty was fine. He'd married a mermaid. He was living on the bottom of the sea. He had, 16 children to his name? Hey, good for him. And this story travelled, as many stories travelled back to Zennor. The villagers there were greatly relieved. A long lingering sadness was lifted. And in honour of Maddie, they carved a very special pew in the church, and I'd very much like to go there to see it. For if you go into the church, you'll find that there is a specially carved pew there of a mermaid, and it is said that this is in honour of Matty and the mermaid that he went to see married.